Prime Minister has vowed to continue the UK's evacuation efforts despite the barbaric attack at Kabul airport.
But the scramble to get more people out of Afghanistan before the looming deadline is now increasing the danger. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace joins us. Good morning to you. Can we just pick up, first of all, obviously we've just been speaking to Dominic Dyer about the latest with Pen Farthing. I mean, we've spoken to you about this before, haven't we? I know that you've been tweeting about this as well to set the facts straight from your point of view. Can you bring us up to date with the latest here? Because Pen himself has said that they were in one level of the perimeter and then they were removed because they didn't have the right paperwork. What's the latest?
Look, I've been quite clear on this. I tweeted because it's not from my point of view. The facts were just being peddled by your previous contributor completely wrongly. No one blocked a flight. That became their cause celeb to begin with. My officials and staff have been inundated with pretty much abusive conversations and emails, unacceptably. Pen himself was called forward last Friday. We encouraged him to do that. He said he wouldn't go without his animals and his Afghans. When the Afghans were called forward, as was their turn, and if you remember, I've been very clear, I wasn't going to allow people to jump queues, and I wasn't going to push some of those desperate people out the way. When they were called forward, their instructions were to go to a location, and obviously they got there. But as I'd said throughout this whole process, this was not about a plane on the runway. This was about the flow through the gates. And the tragedy was that has been proved. That was the reality of it, was that when you get to these places, people were waiting 24 hours, 36 hours to get through the process. And it was why I kept trying to say you can have as many empty aircraft as you like. The simple reality is until you get through the process, you do that. And in defence of Pen, I think Pen is being fed total nonsense by your previous contributor all the time. I've just heard him sketch out his do-it-yourself how to evacuate people from Afghanistan, which is an insult, by the way, to the men and women who have just carried out the most extraordinary evacuation from a very hostile environment using thousands of troops. The US put 5,000 to 6,000. We have 1,000 troops from 16 Air Assault Brigade out there in very, very difficult situations. And we have taken out nearly 14,000 people since August the 14th. We've taken out nearly 8,000 Arab, that's the Afghans. We have obligations to, who helped the military and the wider government. We've taken out over 4,000 or nearly 4,000 British passport holders. We've taken out 1,500 people from other nations. That is an extraordinary achievement. It is not an appalling achievement. And, armchair sort of amateurs like that you've just heard.
Well, I think it's a bit unfair.
We need to be fair to Dominic Dyer, don't we? He obviously feels very passionately about this. And we can sense from you, I know you've been, tweeting about it another time at 1:30 in the morning. It's obviously something that's very much on your mind. But he is extremely keen to protect from the humanitarian point of view. When you know somebody who's directly involved in it, your position as Defence Secretary, obviously you have the overview. But I think when he has that personal connection, when you know those people, of course you would want to do anything to be able to get them out.
Look, I totally agree. Look, but first of all, I did 1:30 in the morning simply because as soon as I found out that his people, Pen's people, had leave outside the rules granted, I thought the quickest way to let them know that they would be made welcome at the airport, they would be facilitated in the same way other people would be, was to tweet it. Now, I could have waited till I woke up at 7 in the morning later, but I chose to do it there and then. It was nothing to do with, it was, racking my mind. It was about getting this out the way so we can get on with the major evacuation. And look, of course, I understand people are passionate about this and people, we've all been inundated with people like that. And some people, we know each other at both ends of the telephone. But that is why it's even more important that when people are isolated or our people are under pressure, that you feed them the correct information, not the incorrect information. It doesn't help Pen to be told that we blocked an aircraft. We didn't. Right? So imagine how he must have felt sitting in Kabul being told that somehow the British government was blocking an aircraft. We didn't. So that can't help him in any way. And so you have to be really careful when you communicate things like that to people because it puts them under greater pressure. And that's all I would say about that.
Well, Ben, it feels like the experience on the ground is very different. We know that there are a matter of hours left with the evacuation. What are the chances of Pen getting on a plane with his staff and his animals? Well,
I think, look, his staff were called forward. We have, last night at about 4:30 in the morning, I authorised the closing of the evacuation centre outside Abbey Gate, where the bombs had gone off. That processing is now no longer going to happen. We're not going to call any more people forward. And indeed, we have 1,000 people airside that we have taken across from Barron's a hotel to process and fly them out. So, look, if Penn makes his way to the airport, the Taliban, as Penn himself has been making out, I think, in the media, that the Taliban have been letting through the passport holders of other nations, and that's why we called him through last Friday, for example. If he makes his way and we can find him, we will try and put him on a flight. But as far as the wider enterprise has gone, as I've been clear throughout, you know, that there was a clear process. I wasn't going to put pets before people. We had to put the humanitarian crisis and those families, some of which lost their lives last night to an ISIS attack, in desperation, have to be brought forward. And that was very, very clear. I don't know what the chances are going to be right now for Penn. I know that he went to the South Gate, which was the American entrance yesterday. We do have spotters there who try and help, but it was fundamentally, and I saw in the, I think the BBC reporting earlier, that he made an appeal to President Biden because clearly the Americans were processing that gate. So look, there are real challenges. I don't know what his chances are, but I know that I am absolutely focused. And one of the reasons I tweeted was to get the facts out there so we could get on with the overall humanitarian task and then the drawdown of our troops.
Well, we've got to hope that, you know, that situation will be resolved and he can get out. But we've got lots to talk to you about this morning. And one of that is the people that are left behind. We heard from a previous guest, her family are right there outside the airport. She was talking about British nationals waiving their British passports, not being able to get through. I know you had talked and you were emotional about the fact that there would be those people that were left behind. Do you have an idea of the numbers that are involved here, about those people that we won't be able to get out in this phase of the evacuation?
Yeah, we think there'll be roughly about 800 to 1,000 ARAP scheme people who have not been able to be taken out. I haven't seen the very latest figures because they're currently, as we speak, being processed within the airfield. Those are people who we have so far taken out about 9,000 since April, including the families of these people. These are the people who helped the British Army. They were interpreters, but they also helped the wider government. They might have been aid or security or other types of supporters. They have come out. That's the vast majority of them. But tragically, there will be some hundred left behind. And then also of British nationals, there's British passport holders. And I've said sort of before on your programme that they're quite hard to quantify because a lot of them were dual nationals or already have left the country much earlier on. And so we're not entirely sure their overall number. So let's say some might live in Dubai, some may be in Pakistan, and they don't naturally ring up and say we've left the country. So we're down to a very low number of estimate on that, and they are provisional, but we reckon there'll be about 200 to 300 of those people left. Some are staying out of choice, we know that. Some will be journalists, for example, who are in country, and some will be aid workers or wishing to stay, and some will just be dual nationals who live, in their view, are happy to stay where they are. But there are a few, as we've seen at the gates, more than a few, desperately difficult for that. We will see what we can do over the next day. But, I knew this time was coming. I didn't hold back about 2 weeks ago about it. That was the nature. When we were given August the 31st, the deadline, and then our military had to be out, which is 1,000 people, then fundamentally we ended up in that difficult position.
Are there any more plans in place for what those people can do? Because when we spoke to the Armed Forces Minister, James Heappey, yesterday, we were asking him, you had said, basically, if you don't have a place on a plane, you have to go to the border instead. There didn't seem to be much of a plan in place for which border people should be going to. We know there are queues at the border at Pakistan. They have already turned around and said, we don't have the facility to take everybody. What does that involve? What help is out there for those people who face that difficult, potentially unsafe journey to the border now, not knowing what's going to be at the other end?
Well, so first of all, myself, the Foreign Office and the Home Office will work together to make sure that we, if needed, we beef up visa application centres in a number of those neighbouring countries. You know, the historical migration routes would show those countries to be, for example, if you said Pakistan is one, obviously some of the stans to Mekistan, you know, Uzbekistan, places like that round the country will be the place. So we want to make sure that when people turn up there, they don't, the host nation doesn't get doesn't close its border to them, so we will be as efficient and as quick as we can. You know, for my Arab scheme people, I will make arrangements to make sure they are brought back to the UK. As far as getting to the third country, that is going to be the challenge, as you rightly said. Some people will be closer to borders. I was asked when I was doing my MP's briefing recently that some of their people have been in touch with them, lived not far from a border, and I was asked, should they go to Kabul or should they go to a third country? And in some of those cases, it will be, well, I don't want to say straightforward because it isn't, but it will be a better option. I also think, and there is some signs of hope in this, that the Taliban will seek to keep the airport open. Certainly in the medium term, I know they are having conversations with other countries that have ties to them or have a good relationship with them about whether they can support the airport continue to run. And I think for our low-risk people, and there'll be many of those who will eventually just be able to get out because they won't be off the attention to the Taliban, if you understand. I think that will be in future. And I do think it's in the Taliban's interest to have open borders to trade. And so there will be a flow in and out of the country. That's not a comfort to those people outside our gate. I know that. It's not a comfort to the people who were called forward and couldn't be processed. And we will do everything we can to give them guidance, help how to look after themselves while they're in Afghanistan. And then the G7, as you know, came together. And one of the results from that meeting was that the international community was going to put pressure on the Taliban to uphold the previous commitments by the government on international law respect and to put pressure on them to respect and give safe passage to our people.
OK, all right. Ben Wallace, thanks very much for joining us this morning. That's the Defence Secretary there. We appreciate it.